The Linde Gang.
But Kieran saw a couple of fellas sound like Braithwaite boys.
Where's my son?
If there's one gang that changed everything, it's this one. The Linde Gang wasn't just dangerous, they were complicated. Some days they were robbing trains like legends. Other days they were arguing over stew and getting chased out of town. Depends on who you asked and what day it was. The gang started with Dutch and Hosea, a pair of smooth-talking schemers who figured crime was better with company. So they built their own little band of outlaws. Not just muscle, misfits. Arthur, John, Charles, Javier, Sadie, even kids like Jack grew up under the campfire. For a while, it wasn't just a gang, it was a family. Messy, loud, and always one plan away from falling apart. You run into them all across the game. Snowed in at Coulter, hiding out in Horseshoe Overlook, sneaking through swamps at Shady Bell, and finally huddled up in Beaver Hollow like ghosts. Every camp gets darker, tighter. The Blackwater mess hangs over everything. And Dutch? He stops being the guy with a plan and turns into the guy with a gun and a grudge. Then there's Micah. If snakes could grow mustaches and snitch on their friends, they'd still be less slimy than this guy. Dutch starts trusting him more than the people who've been there since day one, and the cracks turn into full-on breaks. By the end, people are dead. Arthur's dying, and the dream they all believed in? Gone. Arthur does what he can to save John and Abigail, because if anyone's getting out, it's them. The rest, they scatter. Some die, some just fade out. The saddest part? This gang almost worked. For a while, they really believed they could outrun the world. They wanted freedom. What they got was betrayal, heartbreak, and Micah Bell's voice in their ears. No wonder it all went to hell. Jack Hall Gang.
I've spent the last 3 months hunting treasure on the American frontier. Beautiful country.
If there was one gang that truly nailed the get-rich-and-vanish strategy, but only got halfway there, it's the Jack Hall Gang. These guys were smart, fast, and had just enough paranoia to bury their gold before things went south. Unfortunately, they forgot step 2, staying alive. No one really knows who started the gang. Their names are buried deeper than their loot. But they made a name robbing banks across New Hanover. They didn't just hit small-town safes either. They were thinking big, leaving behind enough treasure that strangers are still trying to map it out years later. If nothing else, they knew how to make an exit, even if it wasn't the one they planned. You won't find the gang itself in-game, they're long dead. But their story lingers in a mission called All That Glitters. Arthur runs into a guy selling a map to their legendary stash. And at first, it sounds like the usual snake oil nonsense. But Arthur's reaction, he doesn't laugh it off. He knows the name, says it like he's heard it more than once, maybe even crossed paths with someone who ran with them. Makes you wonder what really went down back in the day. Following the treasure leads you across the wilderness, from Caliban's Seat to a ridge above the Dakota River. It's not easy. There's climbing, scrambling, and more than a few moments where you wonder if Arthur's going to fall to his death for a couple of gold bars. But in the end, it's real. The Jack Hall Gang may be bones and dust now, but their gold's still waiting. You never fight these guys, and they're not in any big cutscene, but their name still floats around. Even the Linde Gang sings about them at camp. The song's catchy, but if you listen close, it's basically a history lesson. Shoutouts to old-school robberies, shootouts gone wrong, and the kind of endings that don't leave anyone smiling. Rockstar definitely pulled a little from real-life gangs like the James Younger crew. Rob big, get famous, and crash harder than a wagon with no wheels. They buried their gold to come back for it later. The plan was solid, right up until the part where they all died. Dutch's gang.
Oh, it's nice to see you, John.
This gang felt more like a slow-burning tragedy than a criminal crew. Dutch van der Linde's second act in Red Dead Redemption isn't about robbing banks for freedom. It's about unraveling what's left of the man who used to believe in that dream. And somehow, along the way, he still manages to start another gang. Because of course he does. After disappearing in 1899 when the original der Linde Gang fell apart, Dutch resurfaces over a decade later, this time up north in West Elizabeth, and instead of the old gang, he's now leading a group of disillusioned young native men, angry, desperate, and just looking for someone to believe in. Dutch steps in, promises them a return to their land, and they follow him straight into the storm. You mostly encounter them in the Tall Trees region with their main base tucked up in Cochinet. It's a cold, remote fortress, perfect for a man who doesn't want to be found. But they still leave their mark. Ambushes, stolen wagons, the occasional shootout in Blackwater. They've got numbers, firepower, and zero patience for outsiders. And Dutch, he's running the whole thing like he's playing chess with ghosts. Over the course of the West Elizabeth chapter, things get ugly. Bank robberies, hostage situations, and a whole lot of bodies. John Marston, now working for the government, gets dragged into the mess to bring Dutch in once and for all. But Dutch is slippery. He sets traps, stages ambushes, and even uses a girl as a shield during a bank heist. It's not the Dutch we knew before, but maybe it is. Eventually, the government rolls out the big guns, literally, with the U.S. Army storming Cochnay. It ends in fire, gun smoke, and one final conversation on a cliffside. Dutch doesn't run. He just lets go. He lost his gang. He lost his cause. And in the end, Dutch lost the only thing he had left, himself. Williamson Gang.
What a joy that'll be. What a proud black boy I'll be.
The Williamson Gang was what happened when a reckless outlaw got tired of taking orders and decided it was his turn to run the show. After Dutch's gang fell apart, Bill Williamson didn't head for the hills like the others. He stuck around, built his own crew, and took over Fort Mercer like it was his birthright. Problem is, Bill was never the brains of anything, and this gang, it showed. Sometime between 1907 and 1911, Bill pulled together a mix of outlaws, lowlifes, and drifters to form his own operation. They carved out a reputation across New Austin by doing exactly what you'd expect: robbing, raiding, and generally making life miserable for anyone who crossed their path. They were violent, sloppy, and bold enough to be considered the most dangerous gang left in the West, at least until John Marston showed up. The game kicks off with John trying to bring Bill in at Fort Mercer. Bill's response? Shoots him right off his horse. That sets the tone. From there, the gang slaughters Ridgewood Farm, leaves Bonnie McFarlane hanging in tumbleweed, and constantly tries to bait Marston into walking into their traps. They fail. A lot. Eventually, John teams up with Marshall Johnson and a few questionably reliable allies for a full-on assault on Fort Mercer. Wes Dickens plays decoy, John pops out with a Gatling gun, and the whole place turns into a bullet-filled nightmare. Most of the gang gets wiped out in the chaos, but of course, Bill's already gone. Slipped away to Mexico with Javier Escuella the day before. Typical. After that, the gang is finished. No members, no base, no future. Fort Mercer eventually gets overrun by banditos, and Bill's moment in the sun is officially over. They had no uniforms, no side missions, and no real identity outside of Bill himself. Just a bunch of guns behind a wall held together by fear and stubborn loyalty. Bill got the gang he always wanted and ran it straight into the dirt. Murfree Brood.
It's a free country.
Free country?
These guys are the reason people sleep with a rifle by the door and a Bible under the pillow. The Murfree Brood aren't outlaws in the traditional sense. They're what happens when you mix backwoods isolation, violent bloodlines, and a complete lack of anything resembling a moral compass. Imagine a gang raised by wolves, and the wolves got scared and left. Originally descended from a family that immigrated in the 1700s, the Murfrees settled in Roanoke Ridge and never left. Over the years, as the world industrialized, they doubled down on seclusion. By the time Arthur Morgan runs into them, they're less a family and more a feral cult of hillbilly cannibals who kidnap, torture, and kill for fun. And yeah, there's a real strong whiff of inbreeding in the air. You first properly deal with them in Chapter 5 when Arthur and Charles go scouting for a new camp. Beaver Hollow seems promising until they find out it's already home to these machete-wielding cave dwellers. The two clean house, or cave in this case, either by sneaking in or lobbing some good old dynamite to smoke them out. Along the way, they rescue a girl named Meredith who's been locked in a cage. Arthur brings her back to Ansburg, shaken but alive. After that, the Linde Gang uses Beaver Hollow as a hideout. But the Murfrees aren't gone, just pissed. They continued lurking through Roanoke Ridge, setting up ambushes, hanging bait bodies from trees, and occasionally charging out of the woods with machetes like they're auditioning for a horror movie. They're freakishly tough too. Some seem to shrug off bullets like it's a minor inconvenience, and others have been known to set carts on fire and push them toward intruders. It's not strategy in the traditional sense, but it sure keeps you on your toes. Eventually, once the Linde Gang collapses, the Murfrees reclaim Beaver Hollow as if nothing happened, like cockroaches with shotguns. You can clear out their cave, take their loot, and torch the place, but the Murfree Brood always come back, like a bad dream with worse hygiene. Skinner Brothers.
The old man is half cooked. Let's leave it just at that.
If there's one group in Red Dead Redemption 2 that makes the Murfree Brood look like misunderstood hillbillies, it's the Skinner Brothers. These guys don't rob banks or chase gold. They just kill. Not for money, not for revenge. Just because they can. And they don't just kill either. They roast, skin, dismember, hang, gut, scalp, and leave human leftovers as decor. Yeah, they're basically walking nightmares with beards. The Skinners first slithered into tall trees around 1905, and by the time John Marston tries to settle down at Beecher's Hope in 1907, they've turned the woods into a death trap. No base, no laws, just primitive camps full of bones, blood trails, and whatever used to be a person. They don't have uniforms, unless you count shirt optional, machete required. You meet them in the epilogue when they ambush John, Charles, and their hired guns. One poor soul named Willard Wayne gets a knife in the eye just for doing his job. Later, they kidnap Uncle, roast his back over a fire, and nearly kill him. That's how personal it gets. But John and Charles don't let it slide. They storm the camp, put half of them in the dirt, and send a message loud and clear. Not today, psychos. The Skinners aren't gone, though. You'll still run into them in ambushes around tall trees, and they'll make sure you wish you stayed home. Sometimes they fight with bows, sometimes with blades, sometimes they just stand there and scream before charging. They're less like a gang and more like a backwoods cult with a group discount on trauma. John can also hunt down two of their top freaks, Elias Green and Otis Skinner, as bounty targets. You can kill them or bring them in for a good old hanging in Blackwater. Either way, you're doing the world a favor. The Skinner brothers are the monsters wearing boots, and if you're wandering tall trees alone, you might still hear them breathing.